Hi, everybody, and welcome to all of you watching us on Twitch, on YouTube, and on Facebook. I'm Bill Schaefer, and this is Growing Bolder Now, hoping all is well in your world. Thank you for being with us, and let's start off by the way we always do. Go ahead and let us know where you're watching from already. Patricia Bishop has indicated that she is in the house, Stafford, Texas, reporting for duty. So go ahead and let us know where you're watching from. Just write it in the comment section. And I love doing that right from the start, not just for me, but so you can see who's part of this stream too. You know, Growing Bolder draws a very interesting group of people in general, people who care about other people, people who want to make a difference, and people who, whatever their situation is, want to make their life count. They want to enjoy it. Mary Waterman is here from upstate New York. Good to see you this morning, Mary. It's a very empowering group, Mary, that you're joining with. And look at this. Trina Sells is here from Norway. How cool is that? Trina, it's great to have you here. Not even sure how you found us, but glad you have, because the Growing Bolder message, it's not bound by geographic location. It's not about region or race or ethnicity. It's a human thing to wonder, are you living your life to the fullest? Are you getting the most that you can out of it? Are you making a difference for others? It's a very empowering group to be a part of. So we're glad you found us. Here's Rita Bovin from Fremont, Michigan. Glad to have you with us. Steve Medling is here from Kansas City, Missouri. A lot of people checking in, and it's good to know that people are out there. People are everywhere. You're the kind of people that others want to be around. You know, there's a lot, and there's a lot more to Growing Bolder too. I know that a lot of you find us here every week. Sal Gentile, our good friend Sal, is here from Margaritaville in Volusia County. Glad you're here, enjoying life in Florida, Sal. Hope you're well. Aileen Baxter from Oregon as well. And some of you I know are very familiar with Growing Bolder. Others maybe just know this stream that we do or some of the posts that we have on social media. I want to make clear that there's a lot more to it than just our streams. And we hope you'll want to explore the Growing Bolder universe to learn about our public television show, for example, our syndicated TV show, which right now is airing all over Florida this weekend, as a matter of fact, our radio show, our podcast, our digital digest, and our magazine. And the home base for it all on your screen right now, it's growingbolder.com. Please check it out at growingbolder.com. Well, it sure seems like we live in a very divided world, doesn't it? I mean, it's easy to sometimes wonder if we have any common ground at all. Of course, we do, more than we realize. But there's one thing in particular that we all have in common, no matter who we are. Pretty much every single one of us, at some point in our lives, something tragic will happen to us or someone we love. No warning, no preparation. In an instant, our worlds will be different. We'll never be the same again. Loss of a job, a place to live, end of a relationship, a diagnosis, an accident, death. It happens all the time, but not like it happened to our next guest. Her husband was on one of those planes that slammed into the World Trade Center, and you think 9/11 changed you. How about her? How about her 3 kids? Well, she found a way to go on. I don't know how, but if she can do it, maybe she can help the rest of us get through whatever we're going through. This is Christie Coombs. Hi, Christie. How are you?
Hi, Bill. I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
It's great to have you here, and it's even better that you're willing to have these conversations. I'm sure you're not, stuck living that event, for the rest of your life, but I'm sure it's also something that's hard to put behind you as well. And that's the kind of thing that we all have in our own perspectives and in our own worlds. Is that what you have found?
Absolutely. I mean, everybody, as you said, experiences some kind of loss, some kind of tragedy in their lifetime. And because my husband died on 9/11 doesn't make it any more tragic, any more terrible. It's just something that happened publicly, and we've had to grieve publicly, and we've had to deal with the public anniversary every year. And in some ways, it's cathartic because come September 11th, we know people remember what happened. They reach out and they say, they offer their condolences, and they realize that 20 years later, the loss doesn't go away. It's still with us. Whereas if he died, of a heart attack or a car accident or something, the anniversary of his death would just slip by, except with the people that knew us well. And so it's difficult and it's cathartic at the same time. It's very difficult to explain.
Yeah, I can imagine. I know you didn't have a choice to go through this, but you did have a choice on how you would go through it. And
Right.
Thank you for being willing to tell your story. I think by putting yourself out there, you are helping so many other people. Tell us a little bit about the foundation you created to honor your husband.
Well, we created a foundation about a year after Jeff's death, because I just found myself in this dark hole of grief, and I needed a way to work through it. I needed the kids to know that when people do nice things for you, you do nice things for others. So immediately after 9/11, like literally that afternoon, people started showing up at my door as word got around, and they were bringing gifts for the kids. They were bringing meals, little things like that to distract the kids from their grief, at least for a couple of hours, and give them something to smile about. And one way I put it is that a blanket of kindness was wrapped around my kids and me. And that's really what got us through initially. And I wanted to show my kids that when people do nice things for you, you do nice things for others. So 2 months after 9/11, with a lot of help from people in our town, we organized a yard sale and an auction and raised $50,000 to give to other 9/11 families who may not have been getting the same kind of care that we received. And we distributed every penny of it, and it really felt good to do that. And it gave us a positive distraction from our grief. So then fast forward to the spring of 2002, friends approached me and asked me if they could do a golf tournament in memory of Jeff for the first anniversary, just as a way to bring people together and reflect on the last year. And I said, well, Jeff wasn't really a fan of golf. The only reason he golfed was because it was a corporate thing to do. It wasn't his favorite sport. And I said, is there something else we can do, like maybe a road race? So they created a road race in Jeff's memory, held it on around the first anniversary of 9/11. And it really took off. It's over the years, it's morphed into a road race walk and family day. So that first year after raising $50,000, I said, well, there's something that we need to create a reason to spend this money. They wanted it to go to my family, and I said, no, my family's in good shape. Let's help others who need it. So we created the Jeff Coombs Memorial Foundation, which would help families in Massachusetts who were having a hard time financially because of death, illness, job loss, divorce, things beyond their control. And the foundation really got going. The road race was hugely popular every September. And so it continued. And at 5 years, the committee that started it handed it over to me and said, if you want to keep it going, it's your baby now. So I had a great committee behind me. We had a lot of sponsors. We had the enthusiasm from the runners, the 1,000 runners that had signed up every year. And we kept it going. And this year we'll be holding our 20th and final Jeff Coombs Memorial Road Race Walk and Family Day. We decided at year 15 that, all good things must come to an end. There's no exception here. And we decided 20 years was a good time to put that to bed, put the road race, let it cross its own finish line. And so we'll be hosting our last one on September 19th. But the work of the foundation over the last 20 years has really run the gamut from helping these families who are challenged financially to helping military families who find themselves in a difficult situation. For 10 years, we hosted a huge holiday party for military families who had lost someone as a result of their service post 9/11, and for families who had somebody deployed through the holidays. The other things we do is we provide scholarships to graduating seniors from Abington High School. We provide enrichment programs in the schools, and we support a number of different local programs. So in the past 20 years, we've raised and distributed well over $1 million. With the end of the road race this September, we won't phase out the foundation immediately. The work of the foundation will continue as long as there's money. We also get marathon bibs from a John Hancock charity program to run the Boston Marathon, and that usually raises around $40,000 to $50,000 each year. Our runners are committed to raising up to $10,000 each, and so we'll keep that going at least for another year into 2022. And then we'll begin phasing the foundation out, spending the money down, but we'll do what we can to keep scholarships going. So people ask me all the time, how do you do what you do? And my response is always, I started it for selfish reasons, and I've kept it going for partially selfish reasons, because it really gives me purpose. It gives me something to do. It gives my kids an opportunity, my kids who are now adults, gives them an opportunity to help others, and certainly gives young people in our town an opportunity to pay it forward and see the good that can come from a tragedy.
20 years, it's hard for all of us to believe that it's been 20 years. And the last thing you want to happen is to have Jeff become just a statistic, just a number. And by talking about how goofy he was or how much fun he was, I mean, it really humanizes it and makes us remember what was lost that day, why it was such a tragedy.
Right.
And I guess this is probably one thing that people ask you too all the time, but it does help us because we all have our own perspective as well. Can you go through what happened on that day from your perspective?
Yeah. So the night before, on September 10th, Jeff spent time with each of the kids. He took my older daughter, who was 11, to cheerleading practice, and he took my younger daughter, who was 7, with her to the practice just to hang out with him while he watched. And my son was home. And I remember he came home and he said, how much fun it was watching Megan at cheerleading practice. And Julia, he was sitting there reading a paper. He was all about the Boston Globe, read it cover to cover every single day, especially on Sundays. The kids couldn't go near him on Sunday morning until he read his paper and had his coffee, and then he was all theirs. So he was sitting in the bleachers reading the paper, and he had some of the papers sitting on the bleachers, and the wind picked up the papers and blew them all over the place. So my 7-year-old went chasing after them. And he told me how funny it was watching her run after the papers to pick them up. And then they came home, and he helped Matthew put up a new basketball hoop that they had found. They actually were driving through a parking lot of a shopping area, and one of the stores there was a Kmart, and they saw a basketball hoop still in the box sticking out of the dumpster. And so Jeff always loved a good find. So they fished it out of the dumpster, and they came home and they set it up to replace the old backboard, and it was in perfect condition. And I remember that he and Matthew just took such pride in hanging that thing together. And then they played horse, and Matthew said that was the first game of horse that he ever beat his dad in. And then that night, we had family dinner and put the kids to bed. He said goodbye to them because he was leaving the next morning for a 5-day business trip to LA. And so that night he went through the ritual of, important papers are in the bottom drawer of my dresser, the mortgage is here, blah, 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 because he took care of the bills in the house. And I only half listened, like I always did. Nothing's ever going to happen, so I don't need to know this stuff. And so the next morning, so the night before, I remember him saying, I have to be at the train for the 6:02, so that gets me into Boston at such and such a time to get me on a flight at such and such a time. So I didn't really know what flight he was on. I didn't even know what airline he was on. I just knew he was going to LA, and his flight left about 8 in the morning. So the next morning he got up and he got ready to go, and he was going downstairs, and he didn't want to wake up the kids because it was about an hour before they had to get up to go to school. But I had to drive him to the train station, which was only about 5 minutes away. And on the way to the train station, he said, wow, for some reason, I'm really tired today. And I said, well, good for you. You have 6 hours to sleep on the plane. So then I drove him to the train station. He got out, and for some reason, I stayed in the car and watched him walk the platform toward the train. And it just, Jeff had leaned over and gave me a kiss and said, see you in about 5 days, and we'll celebrate our birthdays together, because our birthdays were September 15th and 18th. And so I watched him walk the platform, and it occurred to me, I just thought to myself, we should have better goodbyes, because you just never know. And then I drove home, got the kids off to school. They were all at 3 different schools at that age. And I went in the house after putting my youngest daughter on the bus, and I turned on Good Morning America. I was standing at the counter drinking a cup of tea, waiting for a friend to come pick me up. We were going to go do some errands for the PTO. And I saw Charlie Gibson reporting on what was going on in New York, that a plane had crashed into the World Trade Center. And initially they thought it was just some Piper Cub or some small plane. And, it was a complete accident. And everybody was just, really confused by what was going on. And then as Charlie was reporting, you saw the second plane fly over and crash into the towers. And it didn't take long after that for them to start discussing terrorism in America being under attack. And we didn't know. So then they realized that it was a major airliner that was both planes that were flown into the towers. And I still didn't know what flights Jeff was on, but they said the flight had originated from Boston, and it was a flight bound for LA. So I started putting 2 and 2 together, thinking, wow, Jeff's flight took off at this time, and it was going to LA, and that could very well be his plane. And then I thought, that's stupid. Don't even go there, because these things don't happen to people like me, just small town girl from small town Yuma, Arizona. They don't happen to people like us. And then they started scrolling across. It was American Airlines Flight 11. So Jeff worked from home before it was, before everybody worked from home. He had a home office because his main office was in New Hampshire. So they let him work from home a good part of the time. So I went to his upstairs office. It was a new job. He had just started for Compaq 6 months prior. So I hadn't met anybody in his office. And back in those days, 20 years ago, we had Rolodex or business cards to keep track of phone numbers instead of computers and iPhones. And so I went through his notebook of business cards, and I just pulled out a business card of somebody from Compaq that looked like they might be able to help me. And I called him and said, I'm sure you're familiar with what's going on in New York. I know Jeff is flying to LA today. I need to find out what flight he's on. Could you please research this for me? I know he booked through American Express Travel. So long story short, they got back to me and said, yes, he appeared to be listed on Flight 11. And we can get back to you with confirmation later today when American has been able to go through the roster. So at that moment, I started calling family members. Family members were calling me. I called my friend called me that was going to come pick me up. And I said, I'm not going anywhere until I know where Jeff is. She said, what do you mean? And I told her what was happening. And within 10 minutes, my house was filling up with people. Word got out, and friends started coming over to, see what they could do. My brother-in-law, who lived in Boston, went to the airport. He was ushered into a room where they were keeping family members. Nobody was telling us anything. Nobody knew anything. And then my mother-in-law and father-in-law who lived on the Cape called and said, where's Jeff? And I said, he's on a flight to LA. I think he might be on that flight going to that crashed into the World Trade Center. And my mother-in-law, in her, defensive state, I guess, said, "Oh, don't be ridiculous. Don't overreact." And I said, "I'm not overreacting, Mona. I really think that's where he was. That's what flight he was on." And so my family in Arizona was calling me, and it was just a morning of terror. My brother-in-law was at the house by then. He also lived on the Cape, so he was at my house. And I remember about 1 o'clock, he came into the kitchen and he said, "If my phone rings," he said to somebody in the house, "if my phone rings, don't let her follow me. I'm going to go into the garage." And like 5 minutes later, his phone rang. And of course, I followed him into the garage. And I could see the look on his face was confirmation that it was Jeff's flight. And he was on the phone with American Airlines. And they confirmed that it was Jeff's plane. By that point, my parish priest was there. And my friends tell me that I just collapsed into his arms. And I don't remember what happened next, but they said I just let out a wail. And my next concern was getting my kids home. And as I mentioned, they were at 3 different schools. So I just kept saying, "I want my kids. I want my kids home." So people went to pick up the kids. A couple of friends went to one school where my middle daughter was, and 2 other people went to the other 2 schools. They were next door to each other to get my son and my daughter. And they told them that their mom needed them at home. She wasn't feeling well. And they couldn't figure out what was going on, but they came home, and my son said as soon as he turned the corner, there were cars all the way down the street. As soon as he turned the corner and saw all the cars, he knew it was bad. And then when they saw me standing on the front steps waiting for them, my son said he knew it was about his dad. Now that morning, he was in 8th grade at the junior high. That morning, they were actually watching Channel 1, which was the school TV. And the superintendent directed the teachers to turn off the TVs because he was the school principal who is now the superintendent. He had the foresight to know that a lot of parents in that town traveled for work, and there was a good possibility that some of their kids might have been impacted. So they ordered the TVs off. So my son didn't think anything of it. He had no reason to worry, to be concerned throughout the day. But when he saw me on the front steps, he knew that there was something going on with his dad. And the kids came running up to me, and I just took them in a big hug. Jeff was all about the group hug. So we had a big group hug, and I told the kids that some really bad men took over Dad's flight and crashed it into a building in New York, and that he wouldn't be coming home. And obviously, that's the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. So we went into the house and we sat and we talked a little while, and the kids cried a lot. My son went into his room, and then 3 o'clock came around, school started getting out, and the kids' friends started coming over, which was the best thing that could have happened, because talking about needing your community, the kids really needed their friends. And so their friends were all over, giving them a distraction. And, we were all stunned. Everybody was in disbelief that anything like that could happen, that it could certainly hit our small town, and that it affected our family as closely as it did. I think it was going on all across the country, where people were standing on street corners, ringing bells and holding flashlights and candles, and just a show of solidarity for Americans. And so we were driving around looking at everybody on the street corners, just, feeling the love from everybody all over again. And I tried to roll down the window in my brother's SUV. It was an electronic roll down. He goes, "Oh, don't even try. That window doesn't work." And as I tried it, it went down. And he said, "That window hasn't worked, and I can't even tell you how long." And I said, "Well, it's working now." So then when I tried to put it back up, it wouldn't work. And I said, see, he wanted us to see out the window. He wanted us to feel the cool breeze. And again, he was with us. And just little things like that were, those silly little signs that seem silly to other people that really meant something to us, to remind us that Jeff was there with us. So it was 2 months after that, we decided to have that yard sale and auction that we had, because dealing with the deep hole of grief every day was difficult, and we needed something to pull us out.
And Christie, listening to you tell your story, it's stunning how quickly your life changed, from 1 minute in disbelief, then confirmation, and then almost instantly you've got a house full of people that you're there with and for. You've got media people coming, you've got law enforcement people, and your life instantly shifted its trajectory. And you have every reason in the world to be bitter, angry, and hateful. Why aren't you?
Well, as I explained to my kids, I said, there was a lot of animosity against the Muslim people at that time. And I said to my kids, it wasn't the Muslims that did this. It was the radicals. It's just like, I brought my kids up in the Catholic Church. I was raised Catholic. And I said, it's just as if a Catholic person goes and does something horrendous, it doesn't mean that it's all Catholics that are bad. And I wanted my kids to know that anger, it's okay to feel anger on occasion, but to harbor the anger and to feel angry all the time and to feel like, it was directed at us, or just to feel bitter, is not going to help us at all in our healing. We need to let the anger out that we did feel, yes, but it wouldn't do us any good to always feel angry and to always feel like, our lives are cheated, because there's a lot of people in our situation, because of 9/11 and for a lot of other reasons, that they lost somebody too soon or in a tragic way, or, whatever. So I tried to counsel my kids on not feeling that way. And, there were plenty of days when I felt, woe is me, and I would lock myself up in my house. There were times when some of my friends stopped calling me because they would call me to do something and I would always decline. So it became a joke that if you want Christie to come to something, don't call her, she'll show up anyway. But if you ask her, she won't come. And the reason for that is because if I wasn't invited, I knew I was invited, but the pressure was off to come. If I, as opposed to an invitation, I felt like I was obligated to go and really didn't feel up to it. So it was just, the anger would have not served me. At my grief counselor meeting one day, she talked about the anger, and she said, I was not a person that swears. I still am not one that swears. And my grief counselor handed me a big bat, and she said, you need to get that anger out. And she said, beat the chair and say every swear word you can think of. And so for 5 minutes, I just beat the heck out of the chair and I yelled, and, it was extremely cathartic for me. And I walked out of there and, I felt like, okay, that was something lifted off of me, and that helped. And that's what I wanted my kids to do. I wanted them to be able to get their anger out, but in a safe environment. I didn't want them to direct their anger at anyone. I didn't want them to be prejudiced against the Muslims because it was a group of people from their religion that did this. I didn't want them to fear the Arabic population. And we had a conversation about it. And, we took a flight soon, 6 months later, to go see my father, who was sick. My family thought it would be a good idea that we came to visit. So we had to fly to Arizona. And when we got to the airport, we were randomly selected to have our bags gone through. And my daughter, my 7-year-old, is standing there crying as they're going through everything that she packed in her suitcase, saying, Mommy, why are they doing that? Why are they going through our stuff? And, I said to the TSA person, I don't even think they had TSA instated yet, but I said to the woman that was going through our bags, I said, we are probably the least likely family in this airport to want to do harm to anyone. And she said, I'm sorry, ma'am, we're doing protocol. And I said, I understand. We let them continue with our bags and we went on our way. And, it's just little things like that I figured a touch of kindness was going to go a lot farther than any anger or animosity. And that's how we raised our children, to be kind and responsible and giving people. And I didn't want this to turn us into bitter, hateful people who was always looking over our shoulder.
So many years ago now, Christie, yet I'm sure in many ways it just seems like yesterday. How are you and how are your kids?
9/11 is still with us every day. I mean, there's no getting around it. I wake up and Jeff's not there. 5 o'clock rolls around and he's not coming home. I remember after my youngest daughter went away to college, I was just telling my sister this last night. I was walking through the frozen food section in Target because I really had no reason to go to the grocery store. I wasn't eating a lot. I didn't really grocery shop because, my dinner consisted of a peanut butter sandwich or a scrambled egg. There's no sense in cooking for myself. So I was walking through the frozen food section of Target and I saw a sign that said meals for one. And I literally had to leave the store because I started to cry. And it was about empty nesting. It was about empty nesting alone rather than empty nesting with Jeff, that everybody always told me, oh, wait till you get to empty nest. It's going to be so much fun. But it was completely different empty nesting without Jeff, getting to a point in our lives that we had talked about, raising our kids to be kind, responsible people that would, be independent and on their own. And so I've been empty nesting for 8 years, and it's become a lifestyle that I'm accustomed to. Sure, it's lonely at times, but I don't have to answer to anybody, and I do my own thing, and I come and go as I please, with the exception of my dog, who seems to dictate my life these days. My kids surprised me with a little cockapoo for Christmas the year the pandemic started. And she turned out to be probably the best gift I've ever gotten, because she got me through the pandemic as well. But she does dictate my life now, so she's the only reason I can't come and go as I please. But as far as my children, my youngest is going to be 28 in August. She's getting married in October. My other daughter just got married a month ago, and my son got married a couple years ago and now has a little son who just turned a year old, and he looks exactly like him. And I remember my kids were on the Oprah Winfrey show in June of 2002 when she did a show about Father's Day. And I can still picture my son sitting there at 14 years old. And he said through tears, I want to be a dad someday, just like mine. And he is that dad now. And it's amazing to watch him with his son, Brody. And I'm just so proud of him, because he only learned how to be a dad from his own dad for 13 years. And he's so much like him. He loves, goofy noises and playing goofy games with him, making up things, throwing them around that, in such a way that would make any mother shudder. But he's so much like him, and he's a great dad. And I can tell that whatever he learned from Jeff, he's carrying through. And that's true of my girls too. They're a lot like him. And when my kids got married, the two older kids, when they got married, I knew it was going to be a hard day for them. So we discussed ahead of time, how are they going to incorporate their dad into their ceremony? And they did in their own private little way. And the morning of Matthew's wedding, I gave him a picture of him and his dad. I think Matthew was probably about 2 years old in the picture. And they both had just huge smiles on their face. And I gave him a picture of his dad that morning, and I said, put this picture in your pocket, and that way you'll have dad with you, because he would be smiling today as big as he is in this picture if he were here. And then for my daughter's wedding, last month. Obviously, she didn't have pockets in her dress, so I needed to find a way to include her dad for her that day. So again, I found a little picture, and I said to my other daughter, who's getting married in October, I said, I'm thinking of getting a little locket from, the craft store and putting a picture of Megan and Dad in it, and giving it to Megan to put in her bouquet. And I had given Jeff a pocket watch when the first Christmas we were together, seriously. And, it was a cheap pocket watch, probably cost about $100, but I was a broke college kid. And I gave it to my daughter after Jeff died. And it was inscribed on the inside to Jeff, love Christie, and the year. And so Julia says, Mom, I have Dad's pocket watch. Why don't you put it inside the pocket watch? And maybe the florist can put that on Megan's bouquet. So I said, wow, what a perfect idea. So I did that, and I gave it to the florist, and the way she attached it to Megan's bouquet was just absolutely beautiful. So I gave that to Megan the morning of her wedding. And so I'll do the same thing for Julia, although Julia obviously now knows about it. She says, Mom, how are you going to make it different for me? And I says, I guess I'm not. So you know about it, and that's just the way it is. But it's just little things like that you just try to, bring the memories with you and have the kids have them with them that day, because those are hard milestones to go through without their dad. We have a memorial stone on the Cape at the little beach where Jeff's family has had a house, and his father lives there now. They had the house since 1979, and we pretty much raised our kids there in the summertime. It was a very special place to us. So the brothers got permission from the town at this little beach to put a memorial stone there out of Dedham granite, since he grew up in Dedham. And it's got a plaque on it, and it says Jeff's Beach. So people refer to it now as Jeff's Beach. And my grandson's first trip to the beach he was just a couple months old. And Matthew took him down, and they took him to the rock and took a picture of Brody in his little car seat sitting next to Jeff's rock. And so it's the little things that help you get through, that help you bring those memories with you. And my kids are doing great. They've all got great jobs. They're doing very well. They're with people that they love and respect, and who love and respect them. And as far as the anniversary of 9/11, they all spend it in their own way. They're not sure what they'll be doing this 20th anniversary, but my youngest daughter lives in New York. She's actually marrying a young man whose father also died on 9/11 in the towers. So they do their own thing on 9/11. They do something together. They both take the day off work. And, we all do something differently on 9/11, but for my son and daughter and me, we try to get together the evening of, at least for a drink, to toast Jeff, or just to exchange hugs or whatever. But 20 years is a long time. It's not something you get over. It's something you work through, and you find a way to live happily in spite of it and without them, because you have to, not because you want to. So we live every day, with intention. We try to do as much good as we can, because that's the kind of person Jeff was.
You touched on one thing that I wanted to go back to, because I think a lot of people wonder this. People that suffer grief, when you go through loss, is it possible to truly be happy again?
It is. I mean, it is possible to love again. I had a relationship that ended after 3.5 years, but it took me 8 years to get to a point where I could even think about being with anyone else. And this relationship kind of fell in my lap, and it didn't work out, but I learned that I could love again, and I could be happy again. And, I talk to young widows now. I've met a lot of young military widows, unfortunately, who were far younger than I was. I was 40 years old when I became a widow. And these women are, in their 20s, and they're becoming young widows with children. And I talk to them, and they say the same things that I remember myself saying, that I'll never be able to be with anybody else. Jeff was my only one. And they say, so-and-so was my only one. I'll never be able to be with anybody else. And I just tell them, it's okay to feel that way now, but, let your life play its way out. Grief doesn't get easier. It just gets different. And your heart learns how to manage the grief differently. And loneliness is an awful thing. And if you can find somebody that can fill that void of loneliness, they're never going to fill the void of loss. But if they can fill the void of loneliness, open yourself up to that. And most of these women that I've talked to have found that love. And, I'm extremely happy for them. And most of the 9/11 widows that I know have found love and remarried, and they're happy again. But they talk about how much they miss their husbands, and how much obviously their kids miss their dads. And it's quite a normal thing. So it is possible to love and to be happy, but still have that little hole in your heart that is never, ever going to be filled. So one other thing that I want to touch on, that with regards to how people remember 9/11, back in, I don't know, probably from 5 years out to current day, I started talking to the schools, the school children around 9/11, about why it's important to remember 9/11, and what is the best way to honor the day, and why is it important to remember those people that died, not only the people that died that day, but the servicemen and women who've lost their lives as a result of their service post 9/11, and the first responders and construction workers who spent so much time at ground zero in the rescue efforts, and the rebuilding efforts, and the recovery efforts, who are now dying from respiratory illnesses because of all the toxins that were there that we didn't know about then. And it's important to remember them and to honor them. And in 2009, through the Serve America Act, written by Senator Kennedy and others, 9/11 became a National Day of Service and Remembrance. President Obama signed it into law in 2009. And so we encourage people to remember 9/11 as a National Day of Service and Remembrance, remember the people that were affected, and in their honor, in their memory, do an act of kindness, do some kind of service project. So I became involved as again, through Senator Kennedy, as a co-founder of an organization called Massachusetts Military Heroes Fund. And we work with the bereaved military families in Massachusetts who've lost a loved one as a result of their service post 9/11. And one of the things that we do is, again, like it was so important for us, is community building, bringing people together, bringing those families together, because they can understand each other's loss differently from others outside the military. And we wanted to do something on the anniversary of 9/11 that would involve service, that would give our military families some purpose. So we started a care package drive on the Rose Kennedy Greenway in Boston, where the first many years we would put together 1,000 care packages that we would send off to the troops serving in Iraq and Afghanistan and other difficult areas. And the number of people that came out to help us with that, all the items were donated. People came out to put the packages together. So now, 11 years later, we're still doing that service project. We don't send as many care packages to the troops, but we put together about 500 care packages for the New England Center and Home for Veterans, to help them out. And we also send about 500 packages to troops that are still deployed. And working with Project 351, the youth service organization that works with all 351 communities in Massachusetts, we work with them, they work with us to keep 9/11 as a National Day of Service, focusing the kids on service-oriented programs and why it's so important to give back to their communities. We want the day to not be remembered for the horror and devastation that it called, for the hatred that caused it, but we want it to be remembered for the people who died, the heroes that came from that day, and for the kindness that not only served my family and helped us through, but for the kindness that circulated across the country. I remember led by Senator John McCain from my home state of Arizona, the politicians even came across the aisle and worked together. And that just showed that kindness and compassion has a far greater impact than hatred does on people. And so to this day, the way I want to spend 9/11 is doing acts of service with Project 351 and with Massachusetts Military Heroes Fund. I've done a lot of work with the American Red Cross too, going to their blood drive and thanking the donors who come out at the commemorative blood drive on 9/11 to give blood in honor of those who can no longer give. So there's a lot of positive ways to honor the day, to remember those who died, and to commemorate a tragic event in a positive way.
Christie, you are absolutely amazing. Sitting here listening to you explain what you've been through, it kind of makes me think that you are what we all hope we would be if we were ever faced with a tragic situation. So, Christie Coombs, thank you so much for your insight, your compassion, and your heart. You know, so much of what happens in life is totally out of our control, but how we react to things, that's something that's on us. We choose, we decide.
Exactly.
And in that, we create our own legacy. We set an example for our family, our kids, our friends, and as Christie said, our community too. And ultimately, we set standards for ourselves. And that's what we learn from people like Christie Coombs. And if you'd like to help support Christie and make a difference in a lot of lives, you can find more information at jeffcoombsfund.org. That's jeffcoombsfund.org. And I don't know about all of you watching, but the overwhelming point that seems to come out of Christie's courage and strength is the only way she was able to heal was by helping others, reaching out, making a difference. And it was connecting with all kinds of people, you know, not being consumed inside of herself, not going inward, but by coming outward. And maybe that's something that all of us can take away. You know, we don't all have friends and relatives who we lost 9/11, but we all have people that we've lost. We've all been through tough times. One of the people watching was talking about losing her husband during COVID in the comments section. We have that. We all go through that in our lives. And maybe the lesson from somebody like Christie being as strong as she is and as kind to come on and talk, put her heart right out there for us, is that we get through these things by reaching out to each other, by connecting with each other. I know sometimes I'm afraid, you know, if you know somebody who suffered a tragedy or a loss, you kind of, well, I don't know if I want to reach out or whatever, but do reach out, because when we connect, we grow stronger together. By helping others, we help ourselves and each other, because really we're all in this together. I thought all of your comments during the interview were fantastic. We appreciate them all. And we appreciate you for checking us out. This is what we do week after week. We bring on people from all walks of life with all types of stories to tell, not just to hear their stories, but because don't you think there's always something that we can take out of those stories, out of those experiences that help us navigate our own in times when we struggle, in times when we get a little lost. It really is what life is all about. These people are all interesting, they're enlightening, and they're inspiring. And really, isn't that what we all could use a little more of? Because when it comes right down to it, that's growing bolder. I'm Bill Schaefer, and we'll see you next time.